Welcome to the Life in Our 20s podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in again. I'm really grateful for you guys to be listening to this podcast. It's really motivating to see that people are actually listening. In the previous episode, I talked about, hangout spots and, like places you could hang out with your friends and like how we kind of lack that in my friend group, at least. And that got me thinking a little bit. And I started to think about this other podcast episode idea that I had a while back. And I ran it by a couple people a couple times. And right before recording this, actually, I ran it by one of my siblings. And we thought it might be a good idea to kind of talk about this. So I think it's a big trend nowadays for people my age, like early to mid 20s. I don't know about anybody older than that. I'm just saying this is what I've seen. But people close to my age, they seem to be really missing the past. I follow a couple of accounts like on Instagram and Threads. So, yeah, I know I'm one of those people that has Threads instead of Twitter or X or whatever they call it now. And these accounts that I follow, like on Threads and on Instagram, they're just nostalgia accounts. So they post about stuff like that we saw growing up. Like, a good example is one that I saw recently of like those days that it would be raining outside and you had like PE in elementary school. So they'd like wheel out this giant rear projection TV and like a DVD player or a VHS player, and they'd just make you watch something, like Magic School Bus or something. And they post about this stuff, and it kind of got me to think like how a lot of people my age kind of miss those days in a sense, because it kind of like, at least in my case, it reminds me of like simpler times, times when you didn't have that many responsibilities and you didn't really think too much about like the stuff going on around you, like like big world events and stuff. Like there were like wars going on around the world and stuff, like probably issues with the economy and stuff. Like I grew up during like the, what was it, like 2008, it's like 2007 2008 recession, but you never really thought about it, you know like it was just simpler times. You didn't really think about stuff. You just kind of had fun, and I feel like a lot of people kind of gravitate towards that feeling, and they try to like relive it, or get a little kick out of like remembering those times. So I don't know, like I feel like it's a way to like escape reality for a little bit, to remember those days, to remember when life wasn't that difficult. And the reason why I'm like thinking about this now is because in the previous episode that I just recorded, I talked about hangout spots and how a lot of that came from like movies and TV shows that I would watch as a kid. And it got me thinking a little bit about like the things I used to watch and the things I used to do. And I had a little bit of a conversation, with one of my siblings, and we kind of reminisced on the past. And it reminds me of, this like kind of like feeling of joy that you used to get as a kid, something that is kind of hard to come by now because there's so much going on in the world. So it's kind of cool to look back and like think about the past. I know it's not a good thing to like, get stuck in the past and only think about that, but every once in a while it's nice to like look back and think of the things that like made you happy, or just things that you may have forgotten of, like like your favorite TV show when you were younger, or like things that you used to do with your family. Like I mentioned in the previous episode that one of the kind of hangout spots that I had as a child was like, this Target that was like within walking distance of our house. And it got me feeling like, like nostalgic to remember that when I was a kid, my parents would take me there and we'd just walk around and just look at like, toys and video games, window shop a little bit with the family. And at some point you just kind of like move past that. You kind of grow up a little bit and you stop doing it so much. And what hurts most is that Target's not there anymore. Like the building is there, but it's something else now. It's like a open package store or something like that. And it gets you thinking like, maybe I should have like, taken advantage of that a little bit more. And maybe I should have gone like, a little bit more and enjoyed it while it was still there. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, we get so nostalgic because we kind of miss the old days and we kind of wish that we could go back, or we kind of regret that we didn't take advantage of it back then. Like, it's like the whole, you never really know what you had until it's gone. So I think it's important to, if you enjoy something, like take advantage of it right now, because you never know when you're gonna, 10 years from now, start missing it and make a podcast episode about it. Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of people are just on a nostalgia kick, They want to escape reality a little bit. And like I think one of the best ways is to just kind of go back and look at the things you used to do. And the thing that sucks is like sometimes it just doesn't feel the same anymore. Like you could go back and watch an old TV show that you used to watch or something. You really enjoyed it back then. And now when you watch it, it just doesn't feel the same. And I feel as though like we try to recreate those feelings, but we just can't because we're not the same person anymore. We've grown up a little bit. We're not kids anymore. We're like, learning how to be adults. And we try to find like, comfort in these things, and it's just not there anymore because we're different, like It's one of those things where we're the same person, yet we're so different at the same time, you know? Like, we look in the mirror and it's like, I'm still me. It's just like, like my tastes have changed, or I've been through some stuff, like, like a lot of stress or anxiety or something, and you just don't find comfort in those things anymore. And it just sucks, to remember that you enjoyed these things and like it just doesn't hit the same anymore. And I know that sometimes like you'll like watch something from back in the day and you get that feeling of like, man, this was like the thing back in the day. Like, this is what everybody used to do. This is what everybody used to watch. And now it's like forgotten. A lot of people forget about that stuff. And when you discover it, you get this feeling of nostalgia, like a suddenly you get like this like rush of feelings and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is how I used to feel like as a kid." And you try to get more of it and it just kind of falls flat. I mean, it's just very like, just depressing at times to think that things just changed so much and you don't realize it till you look back. And I don't know, nostalgia is a weird thing because you try to find more of it so you feel like you used to, but then once that feeling is gone, you kind of feel even worse because you know that it's out of reach. You can't get that anymore. So then we try to look for more nostalgic things and we get that feeling again. We get that little high, of like your childhood just for it to fade away again and you're back at square one, maybe even worse because now you're reminded of the past and you know that you can never go back to it. And I just wanted to share like a couple of things that I miss from my childhood a little bit. So, like I miss when like the family was like a lot more connected. My direct family is like still pretty close, but the extended family, like a lot more of my cousins and stuff, we used to be a lot more close. We used to hang out all the time. We had time for each other to, like play video games and talk and just hang out. There's also like TV shows. I just feel like TV shows don't hit the same anymore. Like like I can still go back and like watch a bunch of like the old cartoons and stuff that I used to watch and it's still fun. The newer stuff is just I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same. And then it feels bad because you kind of wish that you could find something similar to what you used to watch in the past and you just can't. And like the same thing goes for like music. There's a bunch of songs that like you would listen to and now you listen to them and it just takes you back and you feel like a lot of the newer stuff doesn't compare. And I remember stuff that I used to do with like my family, like, just go to different stores and stuff and like walk around and those stores don't exist anymore. Like this is going to sound crazy, but like I still remember Kmart and how much fun that was. There was this Big Lots that we used to go to a lot and like that shut down too cuz everything's online now. We used to walk to the park a lot and like you just kind of miss those days. I don't know if anybody else feels that way as well, Like, what do you miss from your childhood? And like, why do you miss it? I think that's the hardest thing to answer. Like, why do we feel this way? Why do we miss the things that we miss? And why do we wish that we could get it back? I don't think it's because we want to be like younger. Um, I think it's because we felt something, but that something is hard to define sometimes. You know, like what type of feeling is this? Like I could only describe it as nostalgia, but what is nostalgia? What is that nostalgic feeling? You know, what is it that makes us go out of our way to relive these sorts of experiences? I just find it really interesting, like how we can be so attached to the past, yet so far away from it at the same time. And I don't know if it's like maybe it's just our memory isn't as good as it used to be or something, you know, like maybe our brain is filling in the gaps a little bit and we actually think that the past was better than it actually was. Because, you know, I feel like a lot of people just remember the highlights sometimes. So we might just remember all the good stuff from the past and we kind of shove all the bad stuff, you know, to the back of our mind and we forget about that. And then when we look back to the past, we're only remembering the good parts. And that's why we think that the past was so much better because we forget about all the nasty stuff that was going on in the world or like, you know, the problems that we had when we were younger because I know that I really enjoyed the past, but like at the same time, like my family was like very, like, you know, we were struggling with like financials. And I remember like we ate a lot of struggle meals, you know, and just like my mom tells this story of like when I was a kid, our house had like really bad leaks and water would leak through the roof and through our ceiling into our living room. And, you know, my childhood innocence, I was like jumping around and like I put on like my rain boots and stuff. And I was like really happy because I thought it was raining indoors. And my mom cried, you know? She was like crying because we were struggling so bad. And you know, we like I never really think about that. Whenever I think of the past, I think about all the good stuff and I forget those types of things that happened. You know, like all the problems in life. And I think a lot of people kind of do that and they give the past way more credit than it deserves. And I don't know, I think it's probably just like how the human mind works, you know, we just try to forget the bad stuff, remember the good stuff. And then it kind of skews our perspective and we're like super biased. And then who knows, like, you know, maybe when I'm like 40 or something, like I imagine like a lot of people that have settled down and have kids, they look back and they remember like being teenagers or like in their 20s and they think about how good life was. Like, you know, like, oh, I used to hang out with my friends and like we used to party and like, you know, we explored the world, but they might not think about the issues like oh, like, I was out of a job for like 3 years and I really struggled, or like, I had a really bad relationship or something like that. They just kind of look at the highlights and they compare it to the negatives that are going on currently in their life. So, like, for example, right now, like I might not have I might not have a sustainable or like stable source of income, and then I think to the past, like, oh man, I didn't have to worry about a job back when I was younger, but my parents still had to pay for us, like, they still had to, feed their kids. And I don't really think about how much we struggled. So I think it just depends on our perspective, and we just gotta make sure that we don't let it get all skewed. But I mean, nostalgia is still an important thing, and I think that we shouldn't avoid it. Like, we shouldn't avoid the things that make us feel good, but we also shouldn't overindulge, if you understand what I mean. Like, when we let it consume our lives and we, like, we let it influence too much and we like draw too many comparisons. It's okay to try to get that feeling of like the past, trying to find what you're missing, but we can't go crazy trying to replicate it exactly, because it's like nearly impossible, I think. But I'll turn it over to you guys, and again, I'll put a poll or like a Q&A under this episode, and if you guys want to share, you guys can. And just, say like, what do you miss from your childhood, your younger years? And what do you think we're missing, you know? Do you agree that maybe our perspective of the past is a little bit skewed? Do you think that we give it more credit than it deserves? Or do you disagree? Do you think it deserves more credit and that it actually was a lot better than the present? Because I know that everybody's position is like different. Maybe you had a really, really bad childhood and you think that you're better off now. Or you're just having a really, really bad time now and your childhood was like perfect. So I guess I'm just curious to see people's perspectives on this topic, because I think it's interesting that we seek these nostalgic feelings even though they can sometimes make us feel worse afterwards. Maybe maybe there is a little bit of like that magic that we kind of lose as we get older, like our imagination and stuff as well. And maybe that's why we're a little bit biased as well. We don't have that anymore. And since we don't have that imagination, um, our perspective may be more realistic. We don't have that childlike innocence anymore. Who knows? It could be a variety. There could be a variety of reasons why nostalgia is the way that it is. But I will say one thing, and that's that maybe we, I'm having trouble putting this into words, but maybe nostalgia is just like, man, I don't know how to put this into words? Like, maybe nostalgia, like, holds the key, to our future happiness. Like, there's something there, there's like a missing piece of the puzzle. And we feel that, like, if we can find that, everything will be alright again, you know? I don't know. I guess, like, it's just a little escape from reality, like I said earlier. You can escape for a little bit, but then you go back to feeling sad, you know? I imagine that that's what a lot of people do with, like, drugs or, like, alcohol and stuff. It helps them escape reality for a little bit. But then once the effects wear off, you're back at square one. But yeah, I'll leave you guys with that little thought experiment. How do you guys feel about nostalgia? Yeah. And I want to thank you guys again for listening to the podcast. I know that maybe the topics that I talk about don't line up with the theme too much, but I'm working on getting better at this, and I have some interviews that I want to do and ask people how their life has been in their 20s. I'm still working out some schedules, but I have a couple of people that have said yes to coming onto the podcast and answering some questions. And now I just need to, create a nice little setup where we can do that. Because right now I'm just doing this out of my room. I'm sitting at my desk, just recording by myself. And it's kind of hard to do this on your own. I feel like it'd be a lot easier if I had another person with me. So once I buy another microphone and I make a nice little setup, we should have our first guest on here. And I hope that you guys enjoy that episode, because I've been working really hard to try to get this set up. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Don't forget to rate and follow. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.